There is a record book, still in print, that names the greatest miser who ever lived. The record holder is a woman. Here is the charge sheet, as the newspapers filed it, that she wore one black dress until it fell apart, that she ate her porridge cold to save the cost of heating it, that she lived in rented rooms under a false name, with no fire and no hot water, that she was worth $100 million while she did it, and that her only son lost his leg because she would not pay a doctor. That story has outlived everyone who told it. Here is the woman answering. My life is written for me down in Wall Street by people who, I assume, do not care to know one iota of the real Hetty Green. I go my own way, take no partners, risk nobody else's fortune. Therefore I am Madam Ishmael, set against every man. So let's open the ledger. Because if she was the greatest miser who ever lived, one fact has never been explained. When the money ran out in New York, the city did not go to the banks. It went to her. New Bedford, Massachusetts, the whaling city, back when whale oil lit the world, and her family owned the largest fleet in it. She was 6 when she began reading the financial pages aloud to the men of her house. By 13, she was keeping the family books. She learned the trade in the counting house at her father's elbow. In the spring of 1865, her father died. Within weeks, so did her aunt. On paper, she was suddenly one of the richest women in America. In practice, she was not. The money did not come to her. It came in trusts. Roughly $1 million she could touch. Around $5 million she could not. She would draw the income for life and never control a dollar of the principal. That is the hinge of her whole life. A woman who had kept the books since she was 13 inherited a fortune and was told, in writing, that she could not be trusted with it. So she went to court. Half her aunt's $2 million was locked in yet another trust with Hetty's name on it. Income only, no control. But Hetty produced a different will, an earlier one, leaving her everything outright, and attached to it a second page, a clause revoking any other will her aunt might ever sign, before or after, a kill switch on the future. Hetty admitted she had written that page herself. She said her aunt had signed it. The signatures were the problem, 2 of them on that page, matching the genuine signature perfectly, not closely, perfectly. So the executors did something never done before in an American courtroom. They called in mathematicians. Benjamin Pierce, the finest mathematician in the country, compared the signatures stroke by stroke and gave the court a number. The odds of 2 genuine signatures matching this exactly by chance were 1 in 2,666 million. The coincidence which has occurred here must have had its origin in an intention to produce it. It was the first time statistics were ever used as evidence in an American court. And it changed nothing, because the judge never ruled on it. The case was thrown out on something else. Under the law of the day, a surviving party could not testify about a private transaction with a dead person. Hetty's account of the bargain she claimed to have struck with her aunt was the only evidence that any bargain existed, and the court ruled she was not permitted to give it. Her testimony was struck. Without it, the judge wrote, evidence of such an agreement was entirely wanting. Bill of complaint dismissed with costs. No forgery was ever found. She was never charged with any crime. Historians still suspect she did it. They cannot prove it either. What the law had done was simpler than a verdict. It had told her she had no voice. Twice. First the trust, then the courtroom. She said it herself. I find men will take advantage of women in business in ways they would not attempt with men. I have found this particularly so in the courts, where I have been fighting all my life. So she stopped asking to be heard, and she started buying. Here is what the miser actually did with her money. She bought government bonds during the Civil War when the market was terrified the United States would never pay in gold again, and she bought them at the discount that terror created. The government paid. Then railroad bonds, mortgages, land in Chicago and San Francisco. When borrowers failed, she foreclosed without sentiment. In her own words, "I buy when things are low and nobody wants them. I keep them until they go up and people are crazy to get them. That is, I believe, the secret of all successful business." And underneath it, the discipline nobody copied. She sat on enormous piles of cash. Every man on the street had his capital leveraged up. Hers sat idle and ready. Cash is not a dead asset. Cash is a loaded gun, waiting for a panic. She did all of it without ever setting foot on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Women were barred. She could not trade in person, could not sit on a board, could not vote. She owned a railroad in Texas and had to install her son as its president, because a man had to stand in front of it. She worked from a roll-top desk inside the Chemical National Bank. A reporter called it the pivot on which millions revolved. Asked whether she employed a secretary, she said, "No, I have a whole bank." And she would not be a resident of anywhere. The taxmen wanted her, and they had a theory that the law holds a woman's residence to be wherever her husband lives. They were not really hunting Hetty Green. They were trying to reach her through her marriage. So in 1895 they hauled her in and asked her, under oath, where she lived. She told them she lived nowhere, that she had no home. They asked, "Do you not live at the Hotel St. George in Brooklyn?" "No, they can't tax me there. I never lived there, only stayed there. This morning I paid my bill and left. My trunks are at Bellows Falls." "Then where," they asked, "will you sleep tonight?" "I don't know. Can't you recommend a good place?" They gave up. They gave up every time. That is why the richest woman in America lived in a $19 a month flat in Hoboken, 1 block from the ferry, with a stranger's name on the doorbell. The name was Dewey. Dewey was her dog and the one thing she spent freely on. He ate rice pudding and rare beefsteak. And the black dress. In 1899, she told a reporter she dressed badly on purpose. Dress rich, and every lawyer, every doctor, every fortune hunter in New York prices you accordingly. She took out a license to carry a pistol, and when they asked why, "Mostly to protect myself against lawyers. I'm not much afraid of burglars or highwaymen." The rags were not madness. The rags were a position. But you cannot wear armor for 50 years and have nobody bleed. In 1885, her bank collapsed. John J. Cisco and Son. It went down holding $25 million of her securities. Her husband, Edward, was the firm's largest debtor. He owed $700,000. She was its largest creditor. So the bank made her an offer. It would not release her property until she paid his debts. 18 years earlier, before she married him, she had made Edward sign away every claim to her money. Everyone thought that was cold. It was the only reason there was anything left to fight over. She paid. She hauled her securities out by the cartload, moved every dollar to the Chemical National, and moved out of the marriage. She never divorced him. She simply never trusted him again. And then there is Ned. Her son hurt his knee sledding at 8 or 9 years old. It never healed. Over the years that followed, the woman who would not buy herself a coat took him to specialist after specialist, moved cities to be near his doctors, carried him through the streets in her own arms when he could not walk, and paid. The leg came off anyway when he was 20. The newspapers said she had dressed the two of them in rags and taken him to a free clinic for the poor to dodge a fee. That story is told. It is also denied, and no document has ever settled it. What the record shows is a decade of doctors, and it was not enough. Here is the cruelty you can prove. She did all of that for her son. For herself, she would not spend $1. In old age, she developed a hernia, refused the operation, and pressed it down with a stick. She was hard on herself, hard on her money, and where it counted, and far too late, nowhere near as hard on her son as the newspapers needed her to be. In the spring of 1907, Hetty Green told a friend to get his money out of the Knickerbocker Trust. Her reasoning appeared on no balance sheet. "The men in that bank," she said, "are too good-looking. You mark my words." That autumn the Knickerbocker went down, The queues went round the block, and there was no money left in New York at any price. And the city of New York came to Hetty Green. She wrote them a check for $1,100,000 and took short-term city bonds in return. She had done it before. 1898, 1901, 1906. The richest city in America had a standing line of credit with a woman who lived in a $19 flat. She could have destroyed them on the price. Others were charging 40% that week. Those to whom I loaned money got it at 6, she said. I might just as easily have secured 40. Never in my life have I practiced usury. So the papers called her a witch, and the men who borrowed from her, the men who actually knew what she was, called her the Queen of Wall Street. Edward died in 1902. She had left him 17 years before and never divorced him, and when he lay dying, she nursed him herself, getting up 3 times a night to check the nurse was awake. She wore black for him for the rest of her life. She died on the 3rd of July, 1916, aged 81. The Times ran the number in the headline, worth $100 million, and it ended by saying, probably her life was happy. The record book still calls her the world's greatest miser. It also still prints the tale that she died arguing with a maid about skimmed milk. She died of a series of strokes. The fable is easier to sell. Her son spent his half on everything she had denied herself: a 60-room house, a yacht, the most famous sheet of misprinted stamps on earth. He died in 1936 with no children. Her daughter kept $31 million in a checking account that paid no interest, lived alone, and died in 1951 with no children. Her will turned up in a drawer among the bars of soap. It gave almost everything away, to 63 colleges, churches, and hospitals. Strangers, everyone. The Green Line simply stopped. And New York. For 30 years she told the taxmen she lived nowhere. 3 months after she died, her estate went straight to the top of the city's assessment roll, $20 million. They only had to wait until she could not answer back. Late in life, she left the Quaker faith for her husband's church. The woman who would not spend $1 on her own body did that for one reason, so she would not have to be buried alone. They called her a witch because she did what the men did, and did it better, and would not dress for the part. Somewhere in this episode, there is a child's wooden sled sitting in a frame where it has no business being. The timestamp goes in the comments. And if stories about money, power, and the people who bend both are your thing, subscribe. Next time, the richest man in the world, who ended his life hiding in a blacked-out room, terrified of a speck of dust. This is Rags to Riches.